be in with the chance of winning a free copy of Volume 10, the latest Scouted Football Handbook, packed with stats, features, profiles and interviews. All you have to do is like this video, subscribe to Scouted Football on YouTube and comment with which player you're looking forward to watching at Euro 2020. There are 3 copies up for grabs and we'll be announcing our winners on Sunday the 20th of June. Hello, Scouted Football fans. You are listening to the Scouted Football podcast with me, Joe Donnohue. It's the Euros, the European Championships, or at least it will be tomorrow. They're finally here, a year late and in vastly different circumstances, but they are here. We've had COVID outbreaks on the eve of the tournament from Sweden and Spain. The North Macedonia team bus being given a ceremonious send-off. Philip Walter Foden harnessing his inner Paul Gascoigne with the bleach blonde look. I wonder who'll end up being Scotland's Colin Hendry this time around. But 5 years it's been since the last European Championships in 2016. I find it absolutely incredible it was that long ago. We were all singing Will Griggs on Fire. Wales were making inroads to the semi-finals. We all discovered the Icelandic clap and best of all, Stan Collymore was bopping about northern France screaming, journaliste, journaliste. This time, though, there's no Northern Ireland or Iceland, but plenty of teams and fans who are likely to kick up a fuss at the various venues. We've got Amsterdam, Baku, Bucharest, Budapest, Copenhagen, Glasgow, London, Munich, Rome, St. Petersburg and Seville as our host cities. And on the Scouted Football podcast panel, Stephen Ganavas and Phil Costa. Gentlemen, how are we doing? But first off, which venue is your favourite? Which one do you most wish you could be at?
I went to St. Petersburg for the World Cup, but I didn't get to watch a game there. So I'd really, really like to go back and watch a match in their new stadium.
I mean, it's got to be Wembley, hasn't it?
Oh, it's very bread and butter. Very bread and butter.
You can't beat the feeling of going to Wembley, really. Even though it's so cliche, for me, it's just a great stadium, and obviously as well. I've got a little soft spot for the Johan Cruyff Arena as well. So,
not fancy another trip to Baku after
I've final. Vietnam flashbacks from Baku. No, stay well clear of Baku. Thank you. I mean, nothing against the place, but
it's got good F1 races.
Yeah, stick to the F1 for Baku. Yeah.
Steve, did you boo Phil's choice of Wembley there? Was that on purpose, or was that because you're very topical and you're very up to date with the news?
Yes, Joe. England's team is full of the Marxists, and we got to boo them at all costs. All right.
Steve, you were at St. Petersburg for the World Cup in 2018. Obviously, it's been 3 years since the last major tournament. Is there anything in particular that you've missed from sort of international football in particular? Because I feel like a lot of the time, the international breaks, they come in September, October, November and March, and they just seem a bit disjointed. And I mean, especially during COVID times, it seemed a bit misguided sometimes. But do international tournaments breathe sort of a new lease of life into the average Joe football fan?
Yeah, I think international football is just the pinnacle. I think everyone enjoys the day-to-day of club football, but when these international tournaments come around, it's just another level. So I went to my first big international tournament games in 2015 for the Asian Cup down here in Australia, and just the atmosphere, people are so passionate about the national team. And I think you were saying in the podcast last week with Alex about how it's a nice way of venting some of that nationalism not in the crazy patriotic way, but in the having the team in front of you and just being loud and having a good time. So yeah, looking forward to this one again, cheering on the ancestral Italian homeland and hoping for some nice results.
Yeah, a feeling of belonging, I think, is probably a good way to describe it. Phil, we're going to get kicked off with sort of today's podcast nice and early, but the general gist is of course going through the a European Championships preview essentially, and we're not going to do it sort of similar to going through the groups, through the teams and whatnot. We're going to go through individual players who we think have probably got a good chance of playing, and then going to go through sort of the squads that are there that are probably a bit stacked with under 23 talents, and the teams that we're going to probably cast a bit of an eye on Scouted. But with it being the Euros, we kind of have a fairly decent grasp on which players are going to be turning out there, many of whom have appeared in the handbooks. But just to get us kicked off, Phil, the floor is yours. Who do you want to get started with?
Well, first of all, I'm gonna start with Spain, COVID ravaged Spain, and look at Pedri. I think he had such an underrated season for Barcelona. I mean, he was the youngest ever Barcelona player to reach 50 appearances. I think he made 52 in total, which is absolutely absurd considering he just came from Las Palmas the season prior. And Ronald Koeman actually wanted to send him out on loan. I'm not sure if many people remember that, but I think there were inquiries from Borussia Mönchengladbach and Ajax, I believe, right at the start of the season when Koeman was sort of assessing his squad, should we say. And I don't think anybody envisaged him making such an impact and being such a consistent figure for Barcelona, especially during their difficult start to the season. I mean, they brought things round a bit towards the end of the campaign, even though they bottled the last few games when there was a hint of a title charge on. But yeah, he's just so silky, so smooth. Um, Links play so well. He's so nice on the turn. He's got great touch with both feet. And for me, the ultimate sort of test for his quality was how often Lionel Messi passed to him. And sometimes you look at Messi and it's just like, oh God, I don't want to pass to this guy, and he'll sort of try and do everything alone. But there were a few nice goals. I can remember one against Athletic Club in particular, when they sort of exchanged a couple of passes with each other, and then Pedri did this insane back heel to put Messi through, and he finished it so well. And for me, that was kind of like an understanding from Messi that this guy's, he's different. And I just think he had such an impressive campaign, and it wouldn't surprise me if he was a difference maker for Spain during the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. Pedri, I think the thing I like about him is that he kind of does a bit of everything. He's a very good distributor over medium to long distances. He's not always successful in ground duels, but he'll muck in and he'll do the work. But he's just got that, as you say, that class, that ingenuity about him. And if he was a 21-year-old, 22-year-old, and having the season that he had at Barcelona, coming off a no prior experience of La Liga, I think we'd all still be very impressed. But the fact that he's still just 18 is, it's a reflection of why he probably should be in with a shout of starting for Spain at the European Championships, provided that he doesn't return a positive COVID test in the meantime. But that has been the big news in the past few days. Obviously, the first positive test was Sergio Busquets, and then Diego Llorente tested positive. Luis Enrique obviously naming a 24-man squad out of a possible 26 to begin with, because he wanted to bring in just the players that he knew he was going to use, and has now been forced to call up 11 of the under-21s and 6 reserves. So it's kind of been a bit higgledy-piggledy for the Spanish in their last few days preparation. Do you think that, in that group, Steve, do you think that there's anyone in particular who might be able to exploit that if, say, for example, a few other Spanish players do have to drop out, and some of the 21s have to step up, because they did relatively well against, albeit it was Lithuania, beating them 4-0 the other evening. But is there any teams in Spain's group where you think that they could potentially exploit that, and any players in particular?
I'll answer in a second, but just on Pedri, and just to pick up on Phil's point, I was watching, I think, the first Clasico of the year, and Graham Hunter was commentating, and he said that exact same thing about, that Pedri has arrived and he's comfortable at this level and he's up for it, because he's one of the guys that Messi will look up and he will have like no hesitation to give him the ball. And, at 17, or I'm not sure if he's turned 18 now, to have the confidence of the best player in the world like that, you're definitely moving in the right direction. So yeah, a step up from the second division to make it so seamless is super, super impressive. But yeah, to continue on in that group, I think a player that everyone will be looking at to maybe cause a few upsets, although Sweden themselves have some issues, I believe, with COVID in their squad. But it's Alexander Isak from Real Sociedad, who has come off his best ever season. I think he scored 17 goals in the league off the top of my head. It was just fantastic this season. I think he's a player. If you haven't watched Isak, he reminds me a fair bit of Dusan Vlahovic at Fiorentina. He's not a target man type, but he's a great athlete, looks to get on the shoulder. He's a fantastic penalty box poacher. But he's also, decent with the ball at his feet, although at, pretty low dribbling volumes. Passing is probably not his strong suit, but he should be a guy that will be a big threat for Sweden, that'll probably look to play a more transitional style going forward at this tournament.
Yeah, sure. And Isak is certainly a player that I'm looking forward to watching more of, because watching La Real in Europe has been, it's been good, it's been fun, but I don't watch them week to week. So watching Isak in close quarters, hopefully over the next month or so, will be quite good. I think that that Group E, which that Spain and Sweden are in, has the youngest player at this tournament, and that's Kasper Kozlowski with Poland. He's 17 years old. I think Jude Bellingham of England is the second youngest, who's also 17. They are the only two 17-year-olds at the tournament, which is quite exciting, because it's always fun to see who the youngest player is at a major international tournament. And I think, given that there could be potential COVID issues with Spain and Sweden in Group E, that Poland could potentially be a dark horse in that group and maybe go a little bit further than many people might expect. But speaking of dark horses, though, Group A, there's quite, there's a glut of under 23 players in that group. It is the group which has the most players aged 23 and under, but a large portion of that is from the Turkey squad. And Phil, you've got a bit of a liking to this squad here, because as you were saying before off air, that they've got players like Halil Dervishoglu, who you were surprised to see, but pleasantly surprised. And Okan Kökçü in the middle. I think there's quite a good young core there.
No, definitely. In terms of dark horses, I've heard a lot of people say Italy, but I'm not really sure they're like a traditional dark horse. I know they've kind of been in the wilderness for a bit. But yeah, Turkey for sure, having sort of looked at their squad and what some of their players have done this year, got just a sneaky little suspicion that they could do something this year. And like you said, a couple of really interesting young players. I've got a couple of interests here with Mert Muldur, for example, who I've profiled in one of the Scouted Football handbooks before. He's a sort of a right wing back from Sassuolo. Particularly in the defence, you see a few names there, and you think, wow, this could really, Zeki Çelik from Lille, who just won the league. I know he's a bit older than our sort of 23 sort of cut off, but he's just had a really impressive season. Even Çağlar Soyuncu, who's a bit older now as well, but was definitely on the scouted radar. Meri Demiral, there's a lot of good talent there, and I think if they can sort of blend that youth with a couple of experienced heads, in the midfield, for example, and even up front with the unlikeliest goal machine in Europe, Burak Yilmaz. I don't know where that season came from, but it was, a joy to watch him, really. If they can sort of get him firing with Hakan Çalhanoğlu, for example, Yusuf Yazici, even Cengiz Ünder, who's still somehow 23. I don't know how that's happened. Seems like he's been around forever. But even like Can Ayhan as well in the defense. So yeah, for me, these guys are like this team is one to watch for sure, because I think they could slowly pick up a few results in the group stages and do some damage. But for sure, I think defensively, they have some really strong, exciting names in there.
Yeah, Turkey had one of the best defensive records in qualifying, so that is something which I think should be something which could be kept an eye on in Group A, certainly. But speaking of dark horses, of course, my pick for the dark horse award, I think we're going to coin that now, is Denmark, because they have a number of young players there that are of interest, and the one, and Steve, you're going to have to correct me on this, because they did not have on UEFA's very, very helpful how to pronounce every player at the Euros name sheet. They did not have Jonas Wind, but we did find an under 21 European Championships how to pronounce names sort of guide from 2019. And Steve, would you do the honors?
Well, I believe it says Wind, but you can never really know with these UEFA pronunciation guides, they can tend to be a little bit dodgy, but we'll go with Vind.
I think we'll go with Jonas Vind, and if we start to hear Wind or Vind on commentary throughout the Euros, then you'll know we're wrong. But now there's no way that you're going to forget him when he appears on the pitch, because he's only starting to sort of break out essentially in international football. He suffered, I think it was 2 major knee injuries so far, two major injuries. I know that at least. But this season for Copenhagen, he's been prolific. He's been involved in, I think, 25 goals in around 32 games. So he's very, very, very effective for one of the better teams in Denmark. And he's a very tall forward. He's got a very good strike on him. Expect him to take penalties. Perhaps not in this Denmark team, but if they do get through to the knockouts, which I'm tipping as my sort of dark horse, then if there's a penalty shootout in the midst, then expect Jonas to step up and take one. But he's Denmark are my pick, and he's sort of the player that I'm singling out from Denmark. Steve, have you got anyone that you'd like to shine a spotlight on?
Well, I'm not sure we'll get to see a lot of him, but Mikael Damsgaard would be a really interesting one, even coming off the bench, because I think he'll give you that bit of pace and that electric counter-attacking speed on the break to hopefully disrupt some defenses, and then he'll give you a lot of defensive effort, which Denmark might need in a not the toughest of groups, but he'll definitely have a tough go against Belgium, and I think Russia will be pretty competitive as well. So
yeah, I definitely think they can get through that group. That's Group B with Belgium, Russia, Denmark, and Finland. We're probably not going to spend too much time on that group because Belgium have just the one under-23 player in their entire 26-man squad. That's Jeremy Doku, and we don't really anticipate him getting an awful lot of minutes. Might see him sort of on the pitch towards the end of the group games, but there's not too much to write home about, not too much to get excited about there. I suppose a lot of people who will be tuning in will be interested to hear about England's group, of course, and our thoughts on the England players, because obviously it is one of the younger squads. There's the likes of Jude Bellingham, as I mentioned, Bukayo Saka, Jadon Sancho, Phil Foden, Reece James, Declan Rice, Mason Mount. There's a lot of young players in that squad, and a lot who will probably see considerable minutes on the pitch. So, I think it's only right that we do discuss the wealth of talent that England have at their disposal this year. It's been quite a while, I think, since England have had such a really, really exciting youth crop at a major tournament. There's been a lot of previous tournaments where the teams have been strong, but not necessarily where the strength has been in the youth. You look at the likes of Jude Bellingham. Even if he doesn't start many games, even if he doesn't play very many minutes, having that potential, having that ability in your reserves essentially at a major tournament is always going to be appreciated, and at 17 years old is immense. It gives you hope for the future if you're an England supporter. But Phil Foden, Jadon Sancho, very good chances of starting games. Marcus Rashford likewise. Reece James, if Gareth Southgate decides to experiment on that right hand side. And of course Mason Mount as well, who's been fantastic for Chelsea this year. What is essentially the question I'm asking, guys, is is it too soon? Is it maybe a year or two too soon for England to be really getting to the final, winning a major tournament with this young group?
Potentially. It's all well and good having these young players, but you are placing a significant weight on their shoulders, because this is not Nations League or Euro qualifying when they're going to play some weaker nations. So should we say this is it now? This is the top of maybe apart from the World Cup. This is the top of international football. So I think it's all well and good being excited about these guys, but I think we just kind of need to let them do their thing. England do have some experience in their ranks. It's easy, in the spine in particular. With Maguire, I'm guessing he will be fit, but even in defence in general, and you've got guys like Henderson in the midfield and obviously Harry Kane up front, so you can sort of build around that spine. And I think sort of going forward, those spots are up for grabs really, because you look at Raheem Sterling, he's just completely tanked out of form, and he was usually a guaranteed starter under Gareth Southgate. So even Rashford, he's had some injury issues. So there's potential there for for example, for Jadon Sancho to come in, even Phil Foden on the left, and obviously there's, like you said, even to have guys like Jude Bellingham on the bench and Bukayo Saka on the bench is pretty absurd, to be honest. It's just such a likable, exciting squad, and actually, my sort of relationship with the English national team has never been too deep. I've never felt that fussed at all by the England national team. It was sort of an Arsenal presence within the team that piqued my interest. But now I'm looking through the squad and I'm just like, these are genuinely likable young guys who I find myself rooting for more and more. Even Mason Mount, like what a season he had. Declan Rice, the same. And my one concern with Southgate is that he doesn't release the shackles enough, and I think this is a team that could really benefit from that if he can just maybe tweak a few things to get a bit more out of the attack. But I think in general, this is a squad that you have to consider one of the strongest.
I don't have too much to add to that, but in terms of should they be competing for this tournament, I think really England are on the clock now. I think there's 5 major tournaments in the next 7 years, and I think it'd be when you see that crop of young players come through. They're not just good players; like these are guys that are top players in Europe already at 21, 22, 19. You got 5 international tournaments in the next, I think, 7 years: 3 Euros and 2 World Cups. And I think if you don't win one of them, it'd be pretty disappointing outcome from the talent of the level of player that you're looking at coming through. Not to mention the fact that you've got, I think, Calvert-Lewin, Chilwell, Grealish, Calvin Phillips, all these guys. I think they're all under 25 as well. So I think it's showtime now. I don't think there's any waiting to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're both very right on that. I think if there wasn't to be one of those tournaments in the next decades that's won by England, I think you have to say that it has been a failure, because obviously the coaching has been implemented. The 2017 the trio of golds essentially, with the under 20 World Cup, the under 17 World Cup, and was it the under 19 Euros, or was it the Toulon tournament? I think where they did fantastically well. England did. So it's kind of the culmination of that year and the players coming through, getting regular minutes at their clubs, and now it's Gareth Southgate reaping the rewards. So yeah, it's about it should be on their minds. I think you've got to put them up there with some of the favourites for this tournament. And speaking of favourites, a strong team, the holders essentially are always going to be strong favourites to retain a title, even though it's rarely done. Would be Portugal, of course, and they've got a handful, a smattering, I think we'll say, of young players in this squad from Fernando Santos. The most exciting for me is Nuno Mendes, who is 18-year-old left wing back, or left back in this system, and is plays for Sporting Club de Portugal, and he's a very, very exciting prospect. I think the fact that a year ago he was only just about breaking onto the club scene, and now is kind of undisputed that he deserves to be in this Portugal squad, and he's pushing Rafa Guerreiro for a place in the team is a reflection of just how big the strides that he's taken over the past 12 months have been. But that's not forgetting João Felix, 21 years old, still very, very immensely talented. One of the few players at this tournament who just has that ability to turn a game on his own. I think it was last year in the was it the semi-finals of the Champions League when we all thought that João Felix had turned the tie on its head for Atletico Madrid, and obviously that didn't turn out to be the case, but he is one of those players. And they've got even Nuno Mendes, his Sporting teammate Pedro Gonçalves, who was formerly at Wolves, of course, now at Sporting, and coming off the back of a 22 goal season, I think it was. I think we mentioned that on the Patreon pod. But yeah, there's plenty to be sort of excited about in there, as well as a healthy helping of obviously experience, which is what you get with Portugal. The big talking point for them is this group that they've got, Group F: Hungary, Germany, and France. They have to play, and it's not a foregone conclusion that they'll get out. Especially in tournament football.
I don't know, man. For me, I think Portugal are one of the favourites along with France. Honestly, I look at Germany and I know they won um, quite heavily the other day in their sort of pre tournament little friendlies. But I mean, for me, Portugal have strength in literally every position. I mean, if you look at a depth chart, it's just insane what they're what's in their squad. I mean, even looking slightly beyond the 23 cutoff. I mean, you've got guys like Ruben Diaz who just had an insane season for Man City. You've got Jota who um, sort of transitioned to Liverpool really smoothly from Wolves. And then obviously you've got Cristiano Ronaldo who could be 55 years old and you would still bank on him to score 5 goals in the European tournament. So it's what you said. Joao Felix, maybe not as consistent as you would like at this stage, but capable of producing those magic moments. And even Renato Sanchez, I mean, he's had such a strange career, and I think it's the classic too much too soon kind of thing, because obviously the last Euros is kind of where he broke through, and everyone was like, "Who the hell is this guy?" Came from absolutely nowhere and dominated grown men, as a 17, 18-year-old. But now he's done the Bayern thing. He's gone. It hasn't worked out, and I think he's obviously found a home now in Lille. Had another really impressive season where they won the league, and I just love his sort of energy and tenacity. And I think this is where football is now. We need mobile, sort of dynamic players in the middle, and I think he's just the perfect example of a modern box to box. And yeah, for me, I think it would be a big disappointment if Portugal don't at least reach the semi-finals. But I know that they've got a difficult group, but Germany, they don't quite do it for me this year. So I think France and Portugal should emerge from that group, even though it's a tough one.
Well, the other thing you've got going for you is the best third place finisher, which were they best third or one of the best third place finishers in the last Euros, and that's how
Yeah,
they
they
got out of the
were.
group.
Yeah, drew all the way to the final, didn't they?
Yeah, they didn't
Essentially.
even win the game
Yeah.
until the semi-final or final, whatever it was.
So that could be another saving grace for whoever comes third in that group.
So in something of a less traditionally or conventionally strong group, you've got Group C, and one of my hopes is that that Ukraine get through from this group. I'm laying all my cards on the table. I think that they've got a good chance. They've got the Netherlands, North Macedonia, and Austria in this group alongside them, and I think it's a real opportunity for them to progress. They've got. I mean, Ukraine are boasting something of a very young squad. They've got Georgi Sudakov, Ilya Zabani, both 18 years old. Anatoly Trubin, who's 19-year-old goalkeeper. But even still, they've got Mykola Shaparenko, Vitaly Mikolenko, Denis Popov, Viktor Sihankov. There are a real core of young players, very similar to England in a way that essentially some of the protagonists in this team are 23 and under. And speaking of the protagonist, it's going to be no surprise to anybody. I'm going to talk about Viktor Sihankov. I think this is his tournament. He has to have a big one. I'm sure he will, and he'll make his he'll make his mark. I'm sure, because he's been so. He's so consistently good, so consistently excellent, so consistently prolific. He's a fantastic penalty taker. He's a fantastic set piece specialist. His technique is brilliant. Playing on that right hand side, on the right side of attack. Coming inside into the half spaces and linking up with forwards in the middle. The neat give and goes which allow him license to get into the penalty area. He's just very good at doing that for Dynamo Kiev, and I'm certain that you'll be able to do it for Ukraine as well, as he has shown, and hopefully you'll be able to do it in an international tournament. But there's also Zabani, who I touched on just then, who is the 18-year-old centre back. I'd say he's probably more likely to start ahead of Denis Popov, who's 4 years his senior but still 22, in the centre of defence, because I think Zabani's got 8 caps to his name now. I think they've all come over the past 8 or 9 months. I kind of had a bit of a baptism of fire on his debut, which was I think a 7 or 8-0 it might have been 7-0 drubbing by France. But he's been very, very solid, very consistent for Dinamo this season, and is a very relied upon presence for Andriy Shevchenko, who obviously is a name many European football fans will know, but for anybody who isn't aware, he is the Ukraine head coach. But yeah, it's I've got high hopes for them, and I can now see it crashing and burning, because that is the nature of international football. Now that I've said that, you get off to a poor start and you're playing catch up for the rest of the two group games. But I hope, and I do think, that they'll be able to get through. Obviously, with that, the four best third place teams qualifying as well, and then it's anyone's guess really, a bit of a lottery with the knockout games. So
I think that they're probably one of the teams that have the starting 11s filled with the most kind of young core of players, because you've got Zaban, you've got Siankov, but then I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that Trubin, the goalkeeper, will be the starting keeper, who had a fantastic season with Shakhtar Donetsk. Was a monster in one of their final group game against Inter Milan that got them through to the Europa League. So he's another one. And then just on Siankov, that he's kind of the perfect international tournament guy that can just, pull off a set piece out of nowhere that gets you that 1-0 win, a bit like Gareth Bale, I think, at the last Euros, that, is relied upon of that freakish moment. And they're the kind of things that Zihankov can pull off.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Those moments which turn a game purely through just having superior technique and the ball sort of falling to you at the right moment. And yeah, the goals that we remember, sort of international games for. Like, I always remember Giovanni von Bronckhorst's goal for the Netherlands. I think it was against Uruguay at the 2010 World Cup. The pile driver from range, and you just think, if anyone's going to line one up from sort of 30 yards and kind of just bludgeon it into the opposition's goal, I'd back Tsihankov to be able to do that, as well as the neater stuff which happens around the penalty area a little more. Moving on, but staying in Group C though, and we're going to do a little bit more of a sort of a player focused look, going back to sort of what we did with Pedri and with Isak. The thing about Group C is that obviously this could be a group in which players who perhaps, especially to British audiences, perhaps are not as well known, could sort of come to the fore. I'm thinking sort of Roman Pavlyuchenko at UEFA EURO 2008. And speaking of strikers, Sasha Kalajic, who plays for Stuttgart this season, who's been a very, he's been prolific, but he's also been a very imposing presence. He will be playing for Austria at this tournament. Just 23 years old. It kind of came to international football and came to top flight football quite late in his career relative to other players around him. But he's a bit of a monster, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at him, you kind of think this man should not be able to play football. His body is just wrong for football. It just it doesn't make sense that he's actually really talented and can move. And he's 6'7", so naturally your brain goes to, all right, let's whip some crosses in, but he's shown a lot of intelligence in and around the penalty box. He's kind of always on hand to finish stuff that's sort of bouncing around, loose balls, things like that. He's comfortable on the turn. I mean, obviously he scored his fair share of headers. I think he scored the most in the Bundesliga alongside Andre Silva last season. But yeah, just a really unexpected sort of goal scorer last year, because Stuttgart in general are heaps of fun. I know there was Silas, who had a really great season before his cruciate ligament injury. He was playing in this weird kind of right wing, right forward hybrid role that basically afforded him license to bomb forward at every opportunity. And then on the other side, they had Borna Sosa. And then there was like Wataru Endo and Nico Gonzalez, and they're just a super fun team. But yeah, for me, I think Kalajic is one to watch, because how do you even mark guys like this? He's just so big and gangly, and defenders are usually on the whole larger than most players on the pitch, but this guy just towers above everybody, and he can be sort of a great sticking point for Austria, because I'm not sure about the overall quality of their side, but they've got some nice players elsewhere in Christoph Baumgartner, who can sort of play that Aaron Ramsey role of getting into the box late with third man runs. And then they've got Zava Schlager, David Alaba obviously takes on a prominent role for them. But I think for Austria, Kalajdzic is my sort of one to watch, shall we say? And I think you'll do a great job to miss him on the pitch, because he's just a massive presence, and he's the typical, without going into too many cliches, he's got a nice touch, and I think he could easily bag a couple, and be a handful for defences. Like you said, maybe an unexpected name to come through, because he was a bit of a late bloomer. He had some injury issues, some bad knee problems. But yeah, he really took his chance this year, and I really enjoyed watching him come through, because I'd never really seen him or heard of him before. So yeah, definitely keep an eye out for him.
The more I think about it, he is a fantastic tournament player, because who else is going to have a 6'7" tall striker who you can, if you're really chasing a game and you need to get somebody, you need to just start pumping balls into the box. That as rudimentary as it can be, you've got that option.
Yeah, I mean, he scored 16 goals and with 5 assists, and the good thing was that he wasn't streaky. It was like consistent goal scoring throughout the season. I mean, there was, I think, like a 6 weeks or 7 week spell throughout January and early March where he was literally scoring every week, and he finished the season really strongly as well. So yeah, for me, he's a really exciting player, and like you said, for tournament football, you've got nothing to lose with guys like this.
I haven't watched a heap of him as well, but from what I have seen of watching a little bit of Stuttgart is that he is a surprisingly good hold-up receiver to his feet, and in that transitional style that Stuttgart play, he's surprisingly good at then laying off and bringing others into the game, which, yeah, at 6'7", you'd expect him to be the kind of guy that, you lump the ball into for him to kind of, head balls on and knock balls onto runners, but he can receive and his feet are pretty sharp to deliver to short targets as well. So, yeah, as you said, a great tournament guy that, you should be able to rely upon to at least, give you a chance to break through the press and craft some attacks.
It'll be interesting to see how players like Matthijs de Ligt deal with a player like him. Steve, I don't know how he's dealt with the likes of sort of Edin Dzeko, Dusan Vlahovic, similar, obviously not as tall, not as gangly, but sort of similarly imposing strikers. How's de Ligt dealt with that at club level?
Yeah, I think de Ligt struggles a little bit more kind of isolated against trickier guys. I think he kind of thrives on that body-to-body dual kind of aspect of it, and he's only starting to enjoy it more learning from the animal that is Giorgio Chiellini. So I think he won't be necessarily fazed by that. Obviously, when you're Kalajdzic and you've got the that massive height advantage, it's always going to be difficult to compete with him in the air. But as far as body to body is concerned, I don't think that's a massive issue for someone like de Ligt.
One of my favorite things about tournament football is when you see, these players that typically you haven't watched every week, and the camera zooms in at a corner or a free kick, and they're being marked by somebody who's about 6'2", 6'3", and it makes them look like a person who's of average height. And it's like, wow, he is really bloody tall, yeah. But I'm looking forward to that moment when undoubtedly it will happen in one of Austria's games. Also in Group C though, and at that 6'2", 6'3" range is Ryan Gravenberch of the Netherlands, who is 19 years old, is the joint youngest in the Netherlands squad with Yuri and Timber. He's a player that I'm very, very fond of. I wrote about him. I was fortunate enough to write about him in Volume 8 of the Scouted Football Handbook. A very good ball progressor, very good carrying the ball. It doesn't do an enormous amount in the way of pressing or sort of work rate, which has come to be sort of a stick which some people have decided to beat him with. But in terms of being a player who can pick it up from the centre half, drive forward through the spaces a number 8 would typically take up, and then arrive where a number 10 is, and join the attacking line, support the attacks. I don't think there are too many better players in world football at the age of 19 who can do all of that. It'll be with Donny van der Beek pulling out of the of the Netherlands squad due to injury, then I think it opens the possibility of Gravenberch getting more minutes. I don't know if it's guaranteed that he'll play, but he got his first goal for his country in the last round of warm up games. Not a typically trademark rifled effort from the edge of the penalty area, but something of a tap in, a little header at the back post after an attempt was saved. But I'm looking forward to seeing some of him, because I think, again, like Kalajic, he could potentially be another one where teams begin to go, oh, actually, this is a player with a profile who would be absolutely fantastic for X or for Y. And of course, you've got the point that he's been educated at the Toekomst, which is Ajax's famed academy. So you've got a lot of positives here. And I think the thing is, he's not in this Netherlands squad because he's just trying to make up because he's there to make up the numbers. He's very much in with a shout, especially now with Van der Beek being omitted of getting some minutes.
Yeah, I think Gravenberch's always been a big lad, and he's well and truly at senior level. He's physically up at the level. I think all through he was playing under 17 Euros, I think, as a 15-year-old, and was always the big kid there. And at senior level, he fits right in, and I don't think there should be any issues with him coming in and having a big impact. I think probably off the bench. His ball carrying, I think, late in games could be really important, and that's probably where he gets the best out of his size. Is he uses his body really well to kind of roll off players and continue progressing the ball forward. I still think that he has some work to do as a creator, but I think as a goal threat from midfield, again coming off the bench, that could be something that could be looked upon to change things up. So yeah, he's another one of those kind of difference maker players that off the bench are always important.
Yeah, I just kind of love how he, it's a bit of, it doesn't really count for much, but I just love how sort of aesthetically smooth he is on the ball. He chucks in like little ball rolls or nutmegs, and even just like you said, he's such a nice carrier of the ball. And it's quite a rare occurrence, because obviously a lot of FIFA and Football Manager players will know about him, but this is like a rare case where an FM Wonder Kid is actually good, instead of being some obscure name that doesn't really amount to much. But yeah, like you said, I think with Van der Beek injured, there's definitely a door opened for him there in the Netherlands midfield, and I think he could bring a lot in terms of transitions and even he's got a nice strike from range from the edge of the box when he arrives late. So I think a lot of teams will be watching with interest, because this is a player that maybe you could say will not be at Ajax in a couple of seasons. So, but yeah, I really like him. I think he's super smooth and kind of reminiscent to maybe a younger Paul Pogba. I know it's a bit of a lazy comparison, but I kind of see some similarities there. So I think he'll surprise a lot of people if he plays.
No, I wouldn't say that's a lazy comparison. I think it's something that, if we're talking about a player which is very, very similar in terms of the style, who has the rigor about him, but also has that smoothness, that silk. I think there's very few at the top level, at least. There's very few players that everyone would know who you could compare him to. And I think while they're not exactly the same, I think in terms of Pogba's long range distribution, it's a lot more refined, as you'd expect. Gravenberch is still only 19. I do think it's a fairer comparison than typically when you are doing comparisons of between two different players and two different teams and systems. But one thing I do want people to keep an eye out for is if there are opportunities for Gravenberch to retrieve the ball, what he'll do is he'll sort of plant his leg between the man and the ball, and usually with a player who's smaller than he is. And he'll just plant his leg in there and then use their challenge as momentum to sort of take the ball with that foot and just spin out of the way and use that to really push on. He's done that so many times for Ajax, and it's something which you just can't help but notice. And especially what Steve was saying about that being a real option to the Netherlands late in games. He's the ability to carry the ball 20 or 30 yards in the space of a few seconds is something which is going to be so useful. I think again, we're going back to the trope of tournament football, but sometimes the games are decided on those moments, and especially so in tournament games. So yeah, that's one thing that I'd implore people to keep an eye out for, because he just does it with such efficiency and regularity. Steve, we've been doing a few sort of shorts on YouTube of players, sort of describing them and their styles in about a minute flat, which has been actually quite fun, to be honest. And if anybody hasn't seen any of those yet, then do get over to the Scouted Football YouTube channel, because there's a lot on there, as well as obviously all the podcasts that you get. Ryan Gravenberch was one of those players we've done a 1 minute snippet on, but so was Adam Hložek, who I was delighted to see was on the bench for the Czech Republic's game the other night. I can't remember who that was against. It might have been Albania. But I was delighted to see him on the bench because that means he's not injured, and he has been injured recently. He was out for around 5 months with, was it a broken metatarsal, or a foot injury of some sort?
Broken metatarsal, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm very pleased to see him there. Like Gravenberch, he's also a teenager, but he's 18, and he's sort of my great hope of Group D. I think if somebody is gonna spoil the party for England a little bit, then maybe a late Hložek goal for the Czech Republic. Would that do you?
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see if he does come off the bench or if he starts. He does have that versatility to play off the right hand side. I think he's done a bit at club level, but yeah, he's one of my absolute favourites from outside the big leagues. Goal scoring machine. He missed 5 months, as he said, with that foot injury, and was still a top joint scorer in the Czech Republic, and I think he scored four goals in 30 minutes. I think in the last league game to come joint top scorer, and I think he's just about to turn 19, but he is built like a truck. He's super strong, about 6'1", I believe. Really good in the air, really good in duels, and then once the ball gets on the ground, he's really strong driving into space. I think his actual 1v1 dribbling is a little bit inconsistent. But that's when he's playing off the wing and he's got more of that chance to play that role, which I think if he is going to start, it will probably be out wide. And then up front, when he can get into the box, he is an absolute wizard. He's got every finish, the acrobatics, the headers, the outside the box, back post, you name it, he can do it. And he's already shown the variety so far in his career. So I'm super excited to see him get some minutes. I've been saying this comp for a while, but I'll bring it up again. He really reminds me of a young Zlatan. He's got that same sort of physique, the same mobility despite his height. So I'm so excited to see him hopefully start at this tournament. And it would not surprise me if someone comes in and tries to pry him out of the Czech Republic and out of Sparta Prague after hopefully some good performances here.
I think we clipped up a couple of his goals on the Scouted Twitter account a few weeks ago, and what I love is just how certain every finish is. Like right foot, left foot. As soon as he's got a yard, he's smashing something into the corner or into the roof of the net, and I love that quality. I really think that's a game changer because, especially younger strikers, it's the typical thing where their finishing is still a bit inconsistent, but he has that sort of Jamie Vardy-esque quality of just being able to smash the ball with little backlift, and I really love that quality in a player. I mean, it's kind of similar to what a player like Lucas Podolski has. I mean, he couldn't do much else on the pitch, but as soon as he found the yard within 18, yards from goal, there was something hammering straight into the top corner. And like you said, he's shown a variety of finishes on either foot with his head, even the acrobatics, and it's a name people will have heard. But now, hopefully, if he can stay injury free and maybe get some opportunities here and there coming from the left, for example, I think he will impress a lot of people, and I'll be very surprised. Really surprised if he's still at Sparta Prague next season, because someone will pick him up for 20 million and get a bargain, really, because I think he has a huge ceiling.
I mean, I've got no sort of understanding of what the market would be like in the Czech Republic, but do you think 20 million would be a sort of a fee that would get him? I would be inclined to say that perhaps, given how much the likes of Sofal and Souček went for, I'd be inclined to say that perhaps he'd go for a little bit less, but I mean, I agree with the sentiment. I think he won't be in the Fortuna Liga, which is the top division of Czech football, for too long, because he I mean, joint top scorer this season, bagged a hatful the season before as a 17-year-old. There's not much that he hasn't done already to show that he is a player who is going right to the top.
Look, I think you're not going to be commanding massive prizes coming out of the Czech Republic historically, and probably the COVID suppressed market. I think somewhere around the 20 million, maybe 25 at a stretch, probably would be enough. Obviously, it depends on who else is coming in for him, but yeah, I think if a West Ham, if they want to complete the Czech connection, then wouldn't surprise me if something around that 20 to 25 would be enough.
Yeah, a Premier League club, I think they could definitely command. Sparta could certainly command that fee. But yeah, moving on to our final sort of spotlighted player, we've got Group A, and that was out of the I mean, it looks like 20 to 30 players at age 23 and under in that group. The one we've gone for is Federico Chiesa with Italy, and he's at the top end. He's a 97 born player, so he's going to be turning 24 later this year. But while we're at the Euros, he will still be 23 and very much within Scouted's purview. Steve, you've obviously watched a lot of Chiesa this season, but in terms of him working well in this Italy team, how does that work under Mancini?
Yeah, well, firstly, I think he's got a bit of a fight on his hands to, nail down a starting spot, because it looks like Domenico Berardi is going to be the right wing option to start the first game for Mancini. But whether he's starting or whether he's off the bench, I think he is a real X factor that can, as we've talked about already, we've said 100 times, but in a tournament, these kind of players surprise you. And Chiesa, his energy, his directness, and I think with players like Verratti, Barella, Locatelli feeding him the ball, he's going to be an absolute handful to contain on the break if Italy can get their counter-attacking game going. And then you got to think about him paired with Insigne on the other flank, and all of a sudden Italy become a bit of a scary prospect. So I'm so excited for this tournament to start, because after Italy missed the 2018 World Cup, it's good to now see some progression of some of these young players coming through, and I think Chiesa will be at the front of that. But there's nothing much more exciting than when he's leading the counter-attack, barnstorming down the right wing. He sometimes can get a little bit carried away and not make the best decision, but I think he's really refined his game a lot over the last year or so at Juventus, and he seems to be fitting in a lot more with other players rather than trying to be the one-man band he sometimes was at Fiorentina. So, yeah, goal scoring, creating energy, he will, off the bench or whether he's starting, will be, one of the players to watch.
I mean, something silly like, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know it's something silly, the number of games that Italy have now gone unbeaten in all competitions and all friendlies and stuff. So obviously they're coming into the Euros in good form. And obviously with a very good qualification campaign behind them. So yeah, with those young players there, that obviously your Chiesas. I mean, speaking of the skill set of Chiesa, I'm quite excited to potentially see he, alongside Chiesa leading those counter attacks. Maybe a flash of Giacomo Raspadori, who's the 21-year-old at Sassuolo, because he's got he can turn on the afterburners as well. It's fair to say, but yeah, with Chiesa, I think. If you're looking at a standout player, a standout attacking player in Group A, between Switzerland, Wales, Turkey, and Italy, aside from of course Burak Yilmaz at Turkey, I think Chiesa is definitely one which could some big celebrations could definitely be on the cards there.
And I wouldn't want to be a left back after 75, 80 minutes to look up at a stoppage and see the substitutes board up that says that Chiesa is coming on, and then having him run at you for the next 10, 15 minutes to finish off the game.
Because he's hungry, isn't he?
Yeah, because not only is he quick, but there's when he's in that mindset, like he really, really wants to get on the ball, and he'll just make it happen. He's got that, that extra bit of will to win sometimes that will just, propel in that extra 10-15% to really put on a show. He did it in the Champions League knockout tie against Porto, where he just decided, I'm taking over this game. I've got to do something, and he scored a couple of goals and was fantastic. So, we haven't seen it yet for Italy. So this will be his first chance to really show what he can do on the international stage.
The sliding doors moment for his international career, perhaps. He's sometimes like he can be a bit nasty in a way. Like, when he's swatting off challenges, you get the impression that he's kind of just shouting no every time somebody tries to come near him as he's trying to break away, which I quite like. He's got that determination.
Yeah, I mean, it's what Steve said. I think his improvement over the last sort of year or so has been really impressive. I think refine was the word that he used, and that's the perfect word, really, because I always felt like, even though he was talented, there was a lot of erratic decision making with his final ball and shooting in particular. I mean, he would, for Fiorentina, he would just kind of get the ball within anywhere of 30 yards and just fire a goal, and it would drive me crazy. It's like, what are you doing? There's people in like much better positions ready for the ball, but yeah, no, I think he's really impressed me this year. He's added, he's kept that sort of similar goal threat, but he's added assists as well. His overall play is very tenacious and active, and like you said, he can either start or he can be a dangerous weapon coming off the bench for the last 15-20 minutes. So, like you said, I think he can be a kind of a joker option for Italy, who I've got a sneaky suspicion about as well, to do some impressive things in the tournament.
Yeah, he could definitely be a very useful extra time player, especially talking about those poor left backs if he comes on in the 85th minute with the game still tied. But yeah, there's plenty to get at there, and the Euros promises to be very, very exciting. I'm sure anybody of a footballing persuasion, which is everybody listening to this podcast, will be delighted over the next month or so. And bringing it full circle, we discussed the things that we like about the Euros and the things that we remember from past tournaments, and I think with that Italy link there, the belting out of the national anthem, the Italian national anthem, will be one of those things that I'm very much looking forward to seeing on Friday night when they take on Turkey in that opener at the iconic Stadio Olimpico in Rome. But that's all from us on the Scouted Football podcast this week. Thank you for tuning in to our Euros preview. Do remember to check out the Scouted Football channel on YouTube, as there's some shorts on there about some players who will be appearing at the Euros, as well as some explainers, such as for Amad Diallo at Manchester United. But yes, it's been a pleasure to record this one, gents. Thank you both for coming on.
Pleasure as always, and Forza Italia.
Yeah, no, always good to be on here, and let's see if football can finally come home.
Let's see what happens. See if Phil Foden's bleach blonde hair can carry England to the semi-finals again. But yeah, that's all from the Scouted Football podcast. I've been Joe Donnohue. Stay safe, take care. Bye for now.